This is a gentle reminder to all my viewers to be careful and stay safe and healthy out there. Hard times will take many of us, but not nearly all, and we can all work to lessen that number by being smart. Thank you. Gotta tell ya, I was not expecting a callback to what I'm pretty confident has always been a lot of folks' least favorite song in the show, myself included. Much like last week, however, we're using the callback as a means to bring to mind the last time Steven and Greg had an actual interpersonal conflict. Specifically, it was the last time Greg tried to mend a gap between himself and Steven, only to risk making it worse. Only now, it seems the consequences have stuck. We're finally talking about Greg's lack of discipline and where that comes from, specifically incredibly controlling parents. Certainly the kind you can imagine molding a kid into someone like Andy when we first meet him. Unfortunately, Greg's attempts to connect only end with Steven feeling even more distanced, envious even, of his father having a relatively normal childhood. And honestly, I gotta say, Steven turning his back on Greg, of all people, is probably the worst wound that Future has offered us to date, to the point that I'm still, honestly, having a little trouble processing it. Steven conflicting with the Gems, or even Connie, in big and small ways is kind of a semi-regular occurrence. The last time he and Greg had anything close to a falling out was smack dab in the middle of Season 1. Greg has never not been a source of warmth and support for Steven over the course of the show, and if there's any relationship the degradation of which would signal Steven's true dark night of the soul, then his dad is it. Like last week, it's a case of recontextualizing consistent elements of the show and letting Steven and the audience truly come to grips with just how messed up certain parts of his life actually are. Smartly, I think the show is still making it clear that Steven's way of lashing out and directing his anger is incorrect, despite most of his points being totally valid. If anything, Steven probably resents Greg for giving him too much choice. Right now, what Steven feels he needs is direction, and from the very beginning, Greg's parenting style has never really been about providing direction to his kid, and now we know why. If Greg's own parents provided him with anything to an extreme, it was a set path. With Steven, while the Gems initially set him on the path of following his mother's footsteps, and then he dedicated himself to correcting her mistakes, now that all that is over and resolved, he's got no foundation to forge a stable identity from. He doesn't even have a notion of identity to act against or in defiance of. As the episode ends and Greg tries his hardest to be understanding and accommodating, Steven naturally tunes it out because more affirmation of his own choices just isn't what he wants or needs to hear. What Steven needs is structure, and a notion, a hint, a nudge, anything regarding what to be. Not boundless freedom, which really just saddles him with the responsibility of working out what he is in a world with no practical use for him. The fact that Steven never went to school factors into this too, and it only makes sense he would be mad about it. Just like I mentioned with last week's episodes, the endgame here seems to be pushing Steven to his breaking point by stripping long-standing elements of the show of any bloom or escapism. In this case, the fact that Steven has never been to school as a creative choice was always just kinda quirky and odd and allowed the character a lot of freedom from a storytelling perspective. But, looking at it objectively, part of Steven having no idea what he wants to be is likely majorly influenced by him not getting to ever be socialized around kids his own age, or introduced to potential interests or career paths that an education might have given him. Lord knows I'm not saying public school is going to guarantee a kid a sense of purpose going forward in life, but could you imagine someone who was allowed to foster peer relationships and a sense of identity the way most of us do in public school spiraling quite this bad? Look, Greg is admirable in that he's a guy with a lot of earnest love for his kid. And in Steven's early years, that more than made up for a lot, and even now I think the show continues to empathize with him more consistently than any other authority figure in Steven's life. Heck, the guy was emotionally mature enough to try and keep contact with his own parents, even though everything we learn about them suggests they weren't worth the trouble. But he really is guilty of poor parenting in exactly the same ways Rose was. Both grew up in stifling environments, and because both built their whole lives around bucking that authority, they basically never had to grow up and become real adults. It only makes sense they'd end up together. Even at their most genuine, they were both kinda big kids fulfilling a fantasy for each other. They were each other's escapism, and they were so dedicated to that escape, lived so completely on their own terms that they never set any terms for their kid. So yeah, Of all the elements in this show that Future seems determined to add a few cynical layers to on the way out, we can add Greg's entire character. And then there's Jasper. With fragments, Jasper proves to be the exact wrong person for Steven to have gone to in his seemingly perpetual hour of need. Jasper, like Steven, has no direction. She has no purpose and no drive to form meaningful relationships and thus no sense of identity outside of her power. She fosters this exact same mentality in Steven, who naturally takes it to an extreme by virtue of the fact that he's maybe the most inherently powerful thing in existence. So when Steven decides that power is what he is, it only figures that he takes it far enough to literally kill someone. Without any foundations for his identity, even Steven's morals are atrophied as he becomes increasingly desperate to just be something. Good or bad be darned. Steven is so desperate to have direction and identity handed to him at this point that he just takes it in stride when Jasper consistently equates who he is with the strength of his abilities, stating that by trying to control his pink outbursts, his friends are trying to put him down for being who he is. Expanding on last week's episodes, Rebecca Sugar confirmed that in a practical sense, what the pink tantrums actually are is a fight-or-flight instinct, triggered by Steven's trauma, making him react to any negative emotional stimulus like he has to fight to survive. Steven basically feels nothing but negative stimulus at this point, and whether she means to or not, Jasper is too toxic an individual to do anything but make it worse. So, Steven's single implicit priority becomes, well, kill or be killed. Just the implication that Steven killed a fish as part of his training montage felt wrong, so imagine the gut punch of him then basically killing a whole person. He revives her, of course, but then we're left on the incredibly dark suggestion that Steven has, in shattering Jasper, put himself on level with the Diamonds, and indeed may find himself with no one else to relate to but them. It's hard to tell where that particular thread is going, but it's certainly not a direction I'd have guessed. It almost feels unfair to the rest of this episode that its biggest impacts lie solely in its last 2 or 3 minutes, but what Fragments really is a stage setter for the finale. And this time next week, we'll have a lengthy, definitive conclusion to Steven's arc and the whole 7-year legacy of this show to ruminate on. How do you think things are going to pan out? What are your thoughts on these 2 episodes, and are there any important points you think I might have missed out on? Let me know in the comments, like the video, and subscribe if you haven't already for more Steven Universe content, and I'll see you in the future. Sorry, what? What do you mean Cartoon Network released a new episode tonight?